What is up, guys? JayzTwoCents here, and it is getting damn hot where I live. Here in Southern California, we are getting well over 100 degrees every single day, which I think is 32 degrees Celsius. I could be wrong. I'm sorry, guys. I just don't know. And I got to thinking, we've talked about radiators, and we've talked about acrylic and PEG tubing, and we've talked a little bit about fluid and water blocks and all that sort of stuff, but we have not spent enough time on fans. Because let's face it, what good does a awesome loop do you if you have shitty ass fans pushing air through your radiator, keeping the cooling capacity lower than it really could be? So today we're gonna take a look at two new products here from Fractal Design. This is their Venturi line of fans, brand spanking new. We're gonna look at the HF14 and the HP14. I'm gonna assume the F stands for air flow, and I'm gonna assume the P stands for air pressure. Now, I went to college to be able to decipher that, so stay in school, kids. Last year, I took a look at the Game Zero gaming headset from Sennheiser, and my friends over at MassDrop have just lined up a price drop for this exact headset. So head on over to MassDrop, check out the link in the description, and you guys can save some money on the Game Zero Sennheiser headphones. Now, both of these fans feature a fluid dynamic bearing, and you know, what really kind of sets fans apart from each other are their bearing designs. And it's actually important to note, depending on how you are going to mount your fan, the orientation it's going to be in means that certain bearing types may or may not perform well and or could even damage your fan. For instance, some fans, and this thing actually is really tight in this box. I'm totally ripping it apart. Yep, I ripped it. Sorry, Josh. You guys have made the packaging J-proof. There we go. Wow, that is a weighty fan. Have you guys ever picked up a fan and it just feels light and cheap? Well, that's not the case here. All right, so we were talking about bearings. This is a fluid dynamic bearing. Some bearings, depending on the kind, there's a sleeve bearing, there's ball bearing, there's fluid dynamic bearing. Sometimes it's actually not recommended to mount certain fans in certain directions depending on the bearing type. So this is a fluid dynamic bearing, which means that the actual shaft itself, I said shaft. The shaft itself is being surrounded by fluid. Now, Fractal Design has actually spent a lot of time on the bearing type on these fans to make them extremely low resistance, which is going to help with noise and power consumption of the fan, but it also means that they're going to be very, very well lubricated, and it's going to keep the lifespan of the fan at its max. Now, there's also a magnet inside here that is going to kind of offset some of the forces that happen when the blades are moving. Who said every action has an opposite and equal reaction? But that holds true for the fans too. You've got these blades that are going around catching air and moving air one direction. Well, you can't have the air moving that way if you're not having equal pressure pushing back this way, because the only way that the air is going to move one direction is because it's being pushed, which takes force. So it has a magnet inside the bearing and in the hub that is going to counteract a lot of that force, which would normally push just a standard cheapo fan back against the hub housing, which would cause rubbing and wear. So they're actually combating that, again, for noise and longevity of the fan. Now, the last thing I want to mention about their hub, which is again found in both of these fans, and their fluid dynamic bearing, is that there are channels and grooves inside there, which are going to allow the fluid to have room to move around the shaft and get a nice uniform coating, again, on the shaft. You know, this is one of those videos where I could just go ape shit with the jokes, but then again, I would get all the hate comments. So I'll just let you guys take it from here. But you get a nice equal distribution of fluid around the bearing and around the shaft, which is going to keep it extremely smooth. In fact, some fans, when I turn the blade, and I know this freaks some people out. Some people get all like, oh my God, don't spin the fan with your fingers. Well, you know, the world isn't exploding right now, so. But it's very, very low resistance. Some fans, if you turn them, you can just feel, they almost feel a little grindy or just not super smooth. Well, this is, I mean, you barely touch that. Look how long that spins. So anyway, this is the airflow fan here. It's got nice rubber isolating mounts on here. As you can see, these bad boys just pop off. Now, why would that matter? Why on earth would you care about that? Well, because as you can see here, they actually include a couple of different mounting sets on here, and guess what? Now 140 millimeter fan, as long as you put these on, can now mount into a 120 millimeter spot. And it becomes basically just a round fan at that point. So you have a single fan 140 millimeter, that can mount into 140 or 120 millimeter fan locations. That is something I really, really like to see. I'm not aware of many fans on the market that can do that. Obviously, as you can see here, this rubber mounting is also going to cause vibration reduction and noise reduction when it comes to the vibration of the fan being transferred into the case or the radiator or whatever you have it mounted. So that is the airflow fan. In fact, if I can get this stupid thing back in, because the rubber on this thing is actually really tight. The other thing I want to point out on here is that they use a very high grade casing for this fan and the fan shroud. It's very, very sturdy. It doesn't feel like it's going to flex around like many other fans do. All right, so really that's not an application issue. That's just the Jayism having a hard time putting rubber in the groove there, which is just kind of ironic. It makes you wonder how the heck I ever got 2 kids out of the deal. All right, so included with the packaging, you also get a voltage reducer. So this is going to allow you to slow the fan speed down as well if you don't have it hooked up to any sort of a fan controller. So now we'll just kind of take a quick look over here at the static pressure version of the fan. This does appear to be a PWM fan. The airflow fan here is a 3-pin. This looks like it's going to be a PWM because it actually has a PWM splitter. Yes, the static pressure fan is a PWM, so they're a little bit different there. Exact same fluid dynamic bearing design, same accessories come with the fan. And once we pull this thing out of here, you'll see that the fan blade shape is obviously that static pressure optimized. So what that means is I'm just gonna rip the box open and I don't even care. I don't even care anymore. Just whatever, find something to put it in. All right. So as you can see, the fan blades are much bigger. There's less fan blades, but there's also less gap between the fan blades. So if you look at the airflow fan here on top versus the static pressure fan here on the bottom, you can see that there's very little room for the air to go once the fan blade actually scoops it. Whereas the airflow fan has a much more straight airflow through the blade, where the static pressure fan scoops it and really sends it out the sides of the fan under much higher pressure, which is how it can push through radiators and things. So why don't we go ahead and take the static pressure fan, we'll mount that one to a radiator, and then we'll go ahead and do an airflow test real quick here with the 140 millimeter airflow fan, and we'll just see how much air it's moving and how loud the damn thing is. What do you think? Sound like a good idea? All right, let's do it.
Transition.
All right, so as you can see, I have my mic unhooked here because I'm going to be using it to kind of listen to different points of the fan to get noise. So first up is the 140 millimeter version. This is a 3-pin, not a PWM. We'll be hooking it up to the motherboard and letting the motherboard run 100%. So we'll see how loud it is like this, how much air it moves based on the piece of paper, and then we'll put in the voltage reducer and we'll see how that does. All right, so there it is at 100%. It's actually moving quite a bit of air, as you can see by that piece of paper there. The fan isn't dead silent, but it's pretty quiet. Let's listen to it at 100%, and I'll put the mic up near the hub so you can hear the motor noise. And to give you an idea of how much air it's actually moving, you can hear the wind noise. I mean, look at that. Look at that. Of all the fans I've tested, I've never had the piece of paper stand straight out. That's insane. Okay, so here it is with the voltage reducer on there. You can see there's still quite a bit of air moving. Can definitely feel it. Here's the noise in comparison. Yeah, I would definitely use the voltage reducer. You're not really sacrificing much in terms of airflow. It's damn near silent, and as you can see by the piece of paper, you still have quite a bit of airflow. Okay, now I'm the first to admit this isn't exactly the most optical application, considering, you know, as you can see there, the fan itself is bigger than the radiator, so they do make 120 millimeter versions of these fans, and I don't have a 140 millimeter radiator sitting around not being used, so I figured this is more or less morbid curiosity to see how well it's going to perform. There are some gaps on each side of the radiator here, so there is going to be some air loss there. But I guess this will be a good, interesting test just to see how it does, just for the sake of science. Wow, but as you can see, oops. Yeah, as you can see, it is certainly moving the paper through the radiator. Stand that up straight. Let's go ahead and stop it. So yeah, you can see it is definitely moving the paper through the radiator. I need to get my hand on some 120s though, so I could really test this in a radiator application. So Josh, if you're watching, we need some 120s, dude. But yeah, you can certainly feel the air coming through the fins, not the... There's a little bit getting stuck right there, but as you can see, I'm blocking that with my hand, and it's not really affecting the airflow, so... Wow, I'm actually kind of impressed with that. So that means if you had a proper fitting fan, a 120 on there, you could slow it down and still get equal amount of static pressure going through there. But look at that flag. Looks like it's waving like a flag. Well, all in all, I have to say I think Fractal Design has got one hell of a winner here. You know, I think if I had any gripe, honestly, it would be the light blue color that's sitting here on the fan hub. But most of the time you're not going to see that because the part that's facing you is pretty much a solid hub here that's not in your face. And if it was pushing air through a radiator, again, that's the way it would look, like that. If it's in the back of your case, it would be like this. So you wouldn't really see that. But I do think an all solid black or even black and gray design would look neat. I think the only other thing too that I'd like to see in these would be other colors. Now I know Fractal Design is very monochrome with the black and the white, but if they started offering a way to get custom colors in these, and I know we're talking like, you know, they just launched these, so it's kind of like skipping way ahead to start talking about colors, then it would be the only fan at the current point of making this video that I would recommend, because you could customize it to your case or your build aesthetic, get static pressure or airflow options. Got the rubber mount, so it's not going to be making noise, and they look fantastic. So you could technically mod this too and paint the shroud, leave the fins black and leave the rubber black, and you have two-tone fan. So I could think of all sorts of uses for this fan. The performance is there. The cable lengths are pretty adequate. They're not too short, not too long, so it'd be easy to manage. All black cables that are running into the hub, so the little wires there aren't going to be, you know, red, yellow, and green like they tend to be in other fans. And you have a nice sleeved cable on top of that. So it goes to show that Fractal Design really spent a lot of time and effort designing these fans. And so if you're looking for fans for radiators or for your cases or for both, then it's definitely a fan worth checking out. So there you go, guys. That was my look here at the Venturi fans. I know it was kind of a long video for fans, but it was definitely worth taking a look at. I'm glad I looked at these. Anyway, tell me what you guys use. What are your favorite fans and why? Fans are one of those things where there's so many options on the market. I think people get a little bit lost on trying to decipher which fan to go with and why. I mean, there's so many different bearing types, so many different blade types. I mean, you got LED fans, you got, there's just so many freaking options. So tell me what you guys are using. You might be able to help someone out down in the comments if you can, you know, articulate clearly why you're using the fan that you are. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and get the heck on out of here, guys. Now, as always, as my eyes are burning here looking at these lights, thanks for watching.